And today, we're going through 20 cases of teenagers who made choices that landed them in front of a judge, and judges who had very little room to be lenient. This is what happened, from the crime to the courtroom, for each of them. 1. Morgan Leopard.
Leopard cried, listening to the tape in court today.
He said, oh, he's going to call the cops.
In April 2008, 15-year-old Morgan Leopard and her 22-year-old boyfriend, Toby Lee Lowry, decided to run away together. The problem was they had no money and no car, so they went to the home of 66-year-old James Thomas Stewart, a former commercial fisherman from Melrose, Florida, who had been born without both hands and lived alone in a rural property. The plan was to steal his truck and get out of Florida, but the robbery did not stay a robbery. Stewart was beaten, stabbed repeatedly with metal rods and a knife, and then suffocated with a plastic bag. His body was not discovered for several days. Leopard and Lowry fled in his truck. About a week later, a nationwide Amber Alert led police straight to them in El Paso, Texas. Lowry, facing the death penalty, pleaded guilty in exchange for a life sentence. Leopard went to trial in Flagler County, where the jury spent over 2 hours listening to her audio-recorded police confession. She sobbed, listening to herself. She was convicted of first-degree murder, burglary with battery, and robbery with a deadly weapon. In September 2009, Circuit Judge Patty Christensen sentenced Leopard to mandatory life in prison without parole. Leopard became Florida's youngest female prison inmate at the time. Later, after a Florida Supreme Court decision requiring special consideration before sentencing juvenile offenders to life, she received a resentencing hearing. The result was still a life sentence, but with the possibility of a parole review after 25 years. 2. Fletcha Torres.
3 warrants for armed robbery and 1 warrant for felony murder.
An apparently shocked Fletcha.
By the time Fletcha Torres, Nicholas Evans, and Khalil Miller were arrested in October 2018, they had already carried out a series of armed robberies across Suwanee, Georgia, over the previous days. Torres was 17, Evans was 17 as well, and Miller was 18. According to investigators, Torres's specific role within the group was to approach potential victims and lure them in. On October 7, 2018, she made contact with 21-year-old William Tunchez, a Lawrenceville man who had just dropped his younger brother home and was heading to visit a family member that night. She offered him sex for $300. Tunchez took the offer and followed her to a wooded walking trail near Northcliffe Drive in unincorporated Suwanee. What he walked into was a trap. Evans pointed a gun at him, and the robbery was initiated. According to investigators, Tunchez was shot and killed during that confrontation, and Torres then took his phone and other belongings. Police connected all 3 to the murder while investigating the earlier robberies. Evans and Miller both admitted to being at the scene. Torres said nothing to investigators. All 3 were charged with felony murder and armed robbery. When the charges were read aloud to Torres in court for the first time, her visible shock was caught on camera and went viral. She threw glares at her 2 co-defendants as the gravity of the situation seemed to land. Torres was found guilty at trial and sentenced to life in prison without parole. 3. Brian Kohi.
He's going to be cooperative with us?
I don't know. I don't think he'll be violent. Just came back from his friend's house.
Does he have any weapons in his room, or do you guys have any in the house?
I don't know.
Brian Kohi Jr. was 19 years old and had been planning to kill someone for roughly 6 months before he finally did. He drove through Grand Junction, Colorado at night, circling homeless encampments, looking for the right person. He settled on Warren Barnes. On February 27, 2021, Kohi found Barnes sleeping under a highway overpass near Crosby Avenue. He attacked Barnes while he slept, stabbed him, and then decapitated and dismembered the body. Kohi took Barnes's head and hands home and hid them in his bedroom closet. He tried to dump the remaining body parts at the Colorado River, but his car got stuck in the water and had to be towed out. Deputies noticed what appeared to be blood on the back bumper. Kohi told them it was theatrical fake blood. On March 1, 2021, Kohi's mother found the bags and called 911. When officers arrived, Kohi met them outside and told them he had always wondered what murder felt like. At trial, the defense argued Kohi was legally insane at the time of the killing. State psychologists concluded he was not. Kohi showed no emotion as the verdict was read. On February 6, 2023, Judge Richard Gurley sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 13.5 additional years on the tampering charges. 4. Jesus, Ayala, and Keys.
The two looked older and were stone-faced. Neither said a word, but the judge sure did, and she was visibly angry.
On the morning of August 14, 2023, 17-year-old Jesus Ayala and 16-year-old Keys stole a Hyundai Elantra from an apartment complex in northwest Las Vegas. Before reaching their final victim, the two had already struck an older male cyclist, who survived. Before reaching their final victim, the two had already struck an older male cyclist, who survived, and rear-ended a separate vehicle. Keys filmed portions of it from the passenger seat. They then targeted 64-year-old Andreas Probst, a retired police chief from Bell, California, who was cycling in a marked bike lane near Centennial Parkway. Ayala drove the car directly into Probst. Keys kept filming, capturing both the impact and the aftermath. Probst died from blunt force injuries to the head. The footage was posted to social media and spread rapidly. Police had initially classified the incident as a hit and run, but after reviewing the video, murder charges were filed against both. After his arrest, Ayala allegedly told an officer that because he was a juvenile, he would only get a slap on the wrist. During earlier court hearings, both Ayala and Keys were caught on camera, smiling, laughing, and making obscene gestures toward Probst's family. Both eventually pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. Ayala was sentenced to 20 years to life. Keys received 18 years to life. Because both were juveniles at the time of the crime, Nevada law prohibited life without parole, meaning those sentences represented the maximum allowable punishment under state law. 5. Jennifer Mee.
A Pinellas County jury convicted Jennifer of murder.
Jennifer Mee became nationally known in 2007 when she was 15 years old and developed a case of hiccups that lasted 5 straight weeks. She appeared on NBC's Today Show multiple times, and for a brief period, she was just a girl looking for a cure. 3 years later, that story took a much darker turn. By October 2010, Mee was 19 and living in St. Petersburg, Florida with 2 friends, Lamont Newton and Laren Ryford. She had developed a method: meet men through social networking sites, set up a meeting, and have Newton and Ryford waiting to rob them. On October 23, 2010, she arranged to meet 22-year-old Shannon Griffin, a Walmart employee who had recently moved to the area. The two had only connected online. Griffin had no criminal record and no prior connection to Mee or her roommates. When Griffin arrived at the back of a vacant home, Newton and Ryford were waiting with a loaded gun. The robbery went sideways. Griffin fought back and was shot 4 times. He died from those injuries. All 3 were arrested within hours. At trial in 2013, prosecutors played a recorded jailhouse call in which Mee told her mother she had not pulled the trigger, but that she had set everything up, and that it all went wrong after that. Her DNA was also found on Griffin's shirt. The jury convicted her of first-degree felony murder after 4 hours of deliberation. Mee wept as the verdict was read. Pinellas County Judge Nancy Moet-Lay sentenced her to life in prison without parole. 6. Daniel Marsh.
I looked up sociopath and psychopath because I always found it fascinating, and the more
Daniel Marsh was 15 years old in April 2013 and had been having violent, homicidal fantasies for years. He had researched serial killers extensively, and on the night of April 13th, he decided to stop wondering what it would feel like. He left his mother's home in Davis, California, and spent hours walking the streets, checking between 40 and 50 homes for unlocked doors or open windows before finding one. Oliver "Chip" Northup was 87, a World War II veteran and attorney who was active in the local Unitarian church. His wife, Claudia Maupin, was 76, a pastoral associate at that same church and a well-known community member. They lived on Cowell Boulevard, just 2 houses from Marsh's father, and both were asleep in their bedroom when Marsh cut through their window screen and climbed inside. He stabbed Northup 61 times and Maupin 67 times. He then mutilated both bodies before leaving. He was deliberate enough to leave behind no DNA, fingerprints, or footprints. The couple was found the next day, but investigators had no leads for 2 months. Marsh was arrested in June 2013 after he bragged about the murders to friends, who then went to police. In his confession, he told investigators the killings had given him a feeling of pure happiness that lasted for weeks. A forensic psychologist who evaluated him scored his psychopathy at 35.8 out of 40, among the highest scores that evaluator had ever seen. Marsh was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder in September 2014, with enhancements for torture, multiple victims, lying in wait, and use of a deadly weapon. The jury found him legally sane. He was sentenced to 52 years to life, 2 consecutive 25-year-to-life terms, plus 2 additional years for the weapon enhancement. 7. Eric Smith.
Obviously, the age of the victim, and that lurking question.
On August 2nd, 1993, 4-year-old Derek Roby set out alone for the very first time to walk to a summer recreation program in Savona, New York. His mother Doreen had her hands full with his baby brother that morning and let him go. He gave her a kiss, told her he loved her, and headed down the sidewalk. He never made it to the park. 13-year-old Eric Smith spotted Derek walking alone and offered to show him a shortcut. He led the child into a wooded area just yards from the 10 park. Once there, Smith strangled Derek until he lost consciousness, then beat him repeatedly in the head with a rock. A banana from Derek's lunch bag was found smashed at the scene, and Kool-Aid from his drink had been poured over the boy's wounds. Smith also sexually assaulted him. Derek Roby was 4 years old. He was tried as an adult. The jury convicted him of second-degree murder in August 1994. In November of the same year, a judge sentenced him to the maximum available for a juvenile at the time, 9 years to life in prison. Smith was denied parole 10 consecutive times between 2002 and 2020. In October 2021, after 27 years in prison, the parole board granted his release at his 11th hearing. He was officially freed on February 1, 2022. 8. Michael Hernandez.
And for the record, Jamie is the victim in this case. How old is Jamie?
Michael Hernandez was 14 years old in early 2004 and had spent a significant amount of time studying serial killers. He kept a written journal containing a list of people he wanted to kill, including his own sister and 2 classmates at Southwood Middle School in Palmetto Bay, Florida, 14-year-old Jaime Goff and a student named Andre Martin. Both were on the list because Hernandez feared they might figure out what he was planning and expose him. He had already tried to get both Goff and Martin into a school bathroom stall together. Martin sensed something was wrong and backed off. Goff did not. One morning in February 2004, Hernandez told Goff he had something to show him and led him into a handicapped bathroom stall before the school day started. He pulled out a knife and stabbed Goff more than 40 times, slashing his throat as well. He then hid the knife in a secret compartment in his backpack and went to class. A teacher noticed blood on Hernandez shortly after, and that was what launched the investigation. Hernandez was tried as an adult. The jury rejected his insanity defense and convicted him of first-degree murder in September 2008. Judge John Schlesinger sentenced him to life in prison without parole in November of that year, along with 30 additional years on the attempted murder charge connected to Martin. Years later, after a Supreme Court ruling required new hearings for juvenile lifers, Hernandez returned to court in 2016 and delivered a tearful apology to the Goff family. Prosecutors responded by playing jailhouse recordings in which Hernandez had joked about his inability to cry and mused that he might need to stab himself to produce real tears for the courtroom. The judge reimposed the life sentence. Michael Hernandez died in prison on April 29, 2021, at the age of 31. The medical examiner confirmed cardiac dysrhythmia attributed to morbid obesity as the cause of death. 9. Joshua Phillips.
The sheriff of Polk County into the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida.
On November 3, 1998, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton crossed the street from her family's home in Jacksonville, Florida, to visit her 14-year-old neighbor, Joshua Phillips. The two were friends who played together regularly. Phillips was not supposed to have anyone over while his parents were out. The two went into the backyard and played baseball together. At some point, Phillips accidentally hit the ball into Maddie's eye. She started bleeding and screaming. Phillips panicked. His father was physically abusive, and he was terrified of what would happen when his father came home and found out. He dragged Maddie inside, hit her with the baseball bat to make her stop screaming, and hid her under the frame of his waterbed. She was still alive when he did it. When his father came home that evening, Phillips sat in his room and acted normally. Later that night, he checked under the bed and heard Maddie still moaning. He removed the mattress, slit her throat, and stabbed her 7 more times in the chest with a pocket knife. Maddie was reported missing the following day. Days later, her remains were found after her mother noticed a foul smell coming from his room. Phillips was convicted of first-degree murder in 1999 and sentenced to life in prison without parole at 15 years. In 2017, after a Supreme Court ruling on mandatory juvenile life sentences, he was resentenced to life with the possibility of a review after 25 years. That review process is currently active. 10. Cintoya Brown.
Had solicited her for sex when she was 16 years old.
In 2004, 16-year-old Cintoya Brown was living in a Nashville, Tennessee motel with a 24-year-old man known as Cutthroat, who forced her into sex work and subjected her to ongoing abuse. On August 6, 2004, a 43-year-old Nashville real estate agent named Johnny Allen picked Brown up near a Sonic drive-in on the east side of the city, paid her $150 and drove her to his home. Brown says that once they were in his bedroom, Allen showed off his gun collection in a way that frightened her, and that when he grabbed her, she believed he was reaching for a weapon. She pulled a handgun from her purse and shot him in the back of the head. She then took 2 of his guns, some cash, and his truck and left. Brown was 16 when she was tried as an adult. A Davidson County jury convicted her in 2006 of first-degree murder and aggravated robbery. She received a life sentence, with parole eligibility only after serving a minimum of 51 years, meaning she could not be considered for release until she was 67 years old. While incarcerated, Brown earned her GED and an associate degree through Lipscomb University's program at the prison. On January 7, 2019, outgoing Governor Bill Haslam granted her executive clemency, commuting her sentence to 15 years. He stated that requiring a juvenile to serve at least 51 years before parole eligibility was too harsh given the steps she had taken to rebuild her life. Cintoya Brown was released from prison on August 7, 2019. After serving 15 years, she was placed on 10 years of supervised parole. 11. Jordan Brown.
The mother of 2 young daughters. She was also the fiancée of the boy's father, and she was 8 months.
Jordan Brown was 11 years old in February of 2009, living in a rural farmhouse in Woodham, Pennsylvania, with his father and his father's pregnant fiancée, 26-year-old Kenzie Houck. On the morning of February 20th, Houck was found shot in the back of the head in her bedroom while she slept. She was 8 months pregnant, and her unborn son also did not survive. Her 4-year-old daughter discovered her and alerted nearby workers roughly 45 minutes after Jordan and Houck's older daughter had boarded the school bus. Investigators focused on Jordan almost immediately. A spent 20-gauge shotgun shell was found on the path he walked to catch the bus that morning, consistent with a youth model shotgun his father had given him as a gift. Houck had previously obtained a protection order against an ex-boyfriend, who investigators were urged to consider as an alternative suspect. That avenue was not formally pursued. Jordan was charged as an adult with first-degree murder, which carried a mandatory life sentence in Pennsylvania. After years of legal battles over his status, the case was heard in juvenile court, where a judge adjudicated him delinquent in 2012. In 2018, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued a unanimous 5-0 ruling vacating the conviction, holding that the evidence was insufficient as a matter of law. Jordan was released from detention and went on to attend college. He later filed a federal civil lawsuit against the state troopers who investigated the case, alleging malicious prosecution and fabricated evidence. A jury ruled against him in December of 2024. 12. Christian Fernandez.
2-2. At this time, I would stand to the indictment.
Christian Fernandez was 12 years old in March of 2011 when he was left alone in a Jacksonville, Florida apartment with his 2-year-old half-brother, David Galarraga, and their younger sister. Prosecutors said Fernandez slammed David's head into a bookshelf, causing the toddler to lose consciousness. His mother, Bianella Susana, came home, found David unresponsive, and waited nearly 8 hours before calling 911. Medical experts testified that prompt attention would likely have saved the child's life. David died 2 days later from blunt force trauma to the head. Fernandez had experienced severe instability throughout his short life. Born to a 12-year-old mother who had been assaulted, he was found wandering alone at age 2 while a caregiver used drugs nearby. By age 8, he had been sexually abused by an older relative, and just months before David's death, his stepfather shot himself in front of the family to avoid arrest on child abuse charges. State Attorney Angela Kohi charged Fernandez as an adult with first-degree murder making him the youngest person in Jacksonville history to face that charge. A court ruled that his police interrogation was inadmissible because at 12 years old he had not been capable of knowingly waiving his Miranda rights. After 2 years of legal proceedings, a defense team that included future state attorney Melissa Nelson negotiated a plea deal. In February of 2013, Fernandez pleaded guilty to manslaughter and aggravated battery and received juvenile sanctions instead of adult prison time. He served 4 years in a juvenile facility and was released on January 8, 2018. One day after his 19th birthday, his mother separately pleaded guilty to aggravated manslaughter for delaying emergency care. 13. Luke Woodham.
That once I killed her, that, I knew I was going to snap. I just wanted to kill her. At 7:50. I walked into the comments. I'd already written.
How do you know it was 7:50?
Because it's 7 o'clock.
Okay.
On the morning of October 1st, 1997, 16-year-old Luke Woodham of Pearl, Mississippi, stabbed and bludgeoned his 50-year-old mother, Mary Ann Woodham, to death in her bedroom before she could leave for her morning jog. He then drove her car to Pearl High School. Concealing a lever-action rifle under a long trench coat, he entered the school commons and opened fire. Among the 9 students he shot, 2 died. His ex-girlfriend, Christina Menifee, and fellow student Lydia Dew. The school's assistant principal, Joel Myrick, retrieved a pistol from his truck and cornered Woodham in the school parking lot as he tried to flee. Woodham had left the emergency brake on and lost control of the vehicle. Myrick held him at gunpoint until police arrived. Woodham was linked to a group of troubled teens called the Croth, led by an 18-year-old named Grant Boyette, who had introduced him to occult rituals in the months prior. Woodham claimed at trial that Boyette had orchestrated everything and held complete influence over him. A jury rejected his insanity defense. He was tried and convicted twice, first for his mother's murder in June of 1998, then for the school shootings later that same month. Each trial resulted in a life sentence. Combined with 7 20-year sentences for attempted murder convictions, Woodham is currently serving 3 life terms plus 140 years. He will be eligible for parole consideration in 2046. At his sentencing for the school murders, Woodham wept and told the court he was sorry. 14. Barry Loukaitis. Barry Loukaitis was 14 years old on February 2, 1996, when he dressed himself as a Wild West-style gunslinger, pulled on a black duster coat, and walked from his home to Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington. He had concealed a .30 caliber hunting rifle underneath the coat, along with 2 handguns and 78 rounds of ammunition. At the time, his home life was in collapse. His parents were in the middle of an acrimonious divorce, and his mother had been telling him repeatedly that she planned to kill herself on Valentine's Day and that he would have to do the same. Loukaitis walked into his 5th period algebra class and opened fire. He killed teacher Leona Kyers, 49, along with 2 14-year-old classmates, Manuel Vela and Arnold Fritz. A 4th student, 13-year-old Natalie Hintz, was critically wounded. Gym teacher John Lane heard the shots, rushed to the room, and physically wrestled the gun away from Loukaitis, preventing further deaths. At trial, Loukaitis pleaded insanity. A jury rejected the defense and convicted him of 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree murder, attempted murder, and 16 counts of aggravated kidnapping. He was sentenced in 1997 to 2 life terms plus 205 years. A Supreme Court ruling in 2012 required his resentencing. In April of 2017, Loukaitis appeared in court and apologized for the first time in writing, saying he owed far more than he could ever repay. Judge Michael Cooper sentenced him to 189 years. Loukaitis explicitly told the court he would not ask to be released because he did not believe he deserved it. Number 15. Kip Kinkle.
Was your dad, did he hit you or anything like that?
No.
Okay. Was he yelling or out of control or?
Yes, I didn't know what to try.
Kip Kinkle was 15 years old in May of 1998, a freshman at Thurston High School in Springfield, Oregon. He had been suspended on May 20th after school officials found he had a stolen handgun in his locker. His father picked him up and the two agreed not to tell his mother until she got home from work. That evening, Kinkle shot and killed both of his parents at the family home. His father, Bill, and his mother, Faith, were both Spanish teachers who, by all accounts, had been loving and supportive throughout his upbringing. The next morning, May 21st, Kinkle drove to Thurston High carrying 2 pistols and a semi-automatic rifle. He entered the school cafeteria and opened fire. 2 students, Ben Walker and Mikael Nikolausen, were killed. 25 others were wounded. Kinkle ran out of ammunition during the attack and was tackled and pinned by 2 students. He later said he had wanted someone to kill him during the rampage because he could not bring himself to do it after killing his parents. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia after his arrest. Defense experts testified he had been hearing voices since the age of 12. In September of 1999, 3 days before jury selection was set to begin, Kinkle pleaded guilty to 4 counts of murder and 26 counts of attempted murder. In November of that year, he was sentenced to just over 111 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Multiple appeals to reduce the sentence have been denied, including a ruling by the Oregon Supreme Court in 2018 that upheld the term in full. 16. Lionel Tate.
Tate claimed he had injured the girl accidentally while roughhousing, but an autopsy report indicated she had been savagely beaten.
Lionel Tate was 12 years old on the evening of July 28, 1999, when his mother left him downstairs in their Pembroke Park, Florida home with 6-year-old Tiffany Unick, a family friend's daughter she had agreed to babysit. Roughly 45 minutes later, Tate came upstairs and told his mother Tiffany wasn't breathing. The autopsy documented more than 35 separate injuries, including a fractured skull, lacerated liver, broken rib, and internal hemorrhaging. The force of the blows, doctors testified, was comparable in severity to being struck by a speeding car. Tate's defense argued the death was accidental, the result of him imitating professional wrestling moves he had seen on television. Prosecutors said the injuries were far too extensive and sustained for that to hold up. Before trial, prosecutors offered a plea deal that would have resulted in 3 years in prison followed by probation. Tate's mother rejected it. The case went to trial, and a jury convicted him of first-degree felony murder in January of 2001. He became the youngest person in modern American history to receive a mandatory life sentence without parole. The conviction was overturned in 2004 after an appeals court found his competency had not been adequately evaluated before trial. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in exchange for 10 years of probation and was released. In 2005, he was arrested for armed robbery of a pizza delivery driver. In 2006, Tate was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the probation violation and the robbery charge. 17. Nathaniel Brazil. Nathaniel Brazil was 13 years old on May 26, 2000, the last day of the school year at Lake Worth Middle School in Lake Worth, Florida. He had been sent home that morning for throwing water balloons in the cafeteria. At home, he retrieved a .25 caliber handgun he had found in a family friend's home and brought it back to school with him. That afternoon, he went to Barry Grunau's classroom door and asked to be let in to say goodbye to 2 female classmates before summer. Grunau said no. Brazil raised the gun. One shot hit Grunau in the face, and he collapsed in the doorway in front of his students. He was 35 years old, a husband and father of 2. Brazil ran from the school but within minutes flagged down. A police cruiser driven by an officer he recognized from his neighborhood fell to his knees in the street and confessed. Despite the severity of what he had just done, those who knew him described him as a quiet, likable kid with no prior history of violence. His home life was a different story, with police responding to domestic incidents at the family residence at least 17 times in the years before the shooting. Brazil was charged as an adult and tried for first-degree murder. The jury rejected that charge, but convicted him of second-degree murder in May of 2001. In July of 2001, Circuit Judge Richard Wennett sentenced Brazil to 28 years in prison without parole, 3 years above the mandatory minimum. He is scheduled for release in May of 2028. 18. Alyssa Bustamante.
Absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then...
Alyssa Bustamante was 15 years old in Street, Martins, Missouri, a small town west of Jefferson City. In the days before October 21, 2009, She had dug 2 graves in the woods behind her neighborhood. That evening, she sent her 6-year-old sister to knock on the door of 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, a neighbor 4 houses away, and invite her outside to play. Elizabeth's mother allowed it as long as she was back by 6 o'clock. Elizabeth never came home. Bustamante lured Elizabeth into the woods, strangled her, slit her throat, and stabbed her 8 times in the chest. She buried the body in one of the pre-dug graves and covered it with leaves. That same night, she attended a church dance. A diary entry found in her bedroom with the date of October 21st began with 2 words investigators could barely make out: slit and throat. When police questioned her during the search for Elizabeth, Bustamante eventually led them to the body herself. She had a history of depression and a prior suicide attempt, and her social media profiles listed killing people as a hobby. When asked why she did it, she told investigators she wanted to know what it felt like. Bustamante was charged as an adult with first-degree murder. She pleaded guilty in January of 2012 to second-degree murder and armed criminal action, avoiding the possibility of life without parole. In February of 2012, Judge Patricia Joyce sentenced her to life in prison plus a consecutive 30 years. A parole hearing was held in July of 2024. She was denied. 19. Brandon McInerney.
February 12th of 2008 at E.O. Green Junior High in Oxnard.
Brandon McInerney was 14 years old and enrolled at E.O. Green Junior High School in Oxnard, California, in early 2008. His classmate, 15-year-old Larry King, was openly gay and had recently begun coming to school wearing makeup, heels, and feminine accessories. In the weeks before the shooting, tensions between the two had escalated. King had been making advances toward McInerney and other boys at school. Several people heard McInerney make threats against King in the days leading up to February 12th. Teachers later acknowledged they had noticed the growing conflict but had not intervened effectively. On the morning of February 12th, 2008, McInerney sat down behind King in the school's computer lab, pulled a .22 caliber handgun from his backpack, and shot King twice in the back of the head in front of a full classroom. He set the gun down and walked out. King was rushed to the hospital but removed from life support 2 days later, on Valentine's Day. McInerney was charged as an adult with first-degree murder and a hate crime enhancement. His first trial ended in a mistrial in September of 2011 after the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. Several jurors later said they did not believe he should have been tried as an adult. Prosecutors dropped the hate crime charge ahead of a second trial. In November of 2011, McInerney pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter with use of a firearm. In December of 2011, he was sentenced to 21 years in prison with no credit for time served and no possibility of early release. He did not speak at sentencing. 20. Craig Price.
Price was so young when he committed his crimes, he was free to be released on his 21st birthday.
Craig Price committed his first murder at 13 years old. On the night of July 27, 1987, he broke into the home of 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer in the Buttonwoods neighborhood of Warwick, Rhode Island. 2 houses from his own, he took a knife from her kitchen and stabbed her 58 times. The case went unsolved for 2 years. On September 1, 1989, Price, now 15, killed 3 more people in the same neighborhood. 39-year-old Joan Heaton and her 2 daughters, 10-year-old Jennifer and 8-year-old Melissa. He used kitchen knives and stabbed Joan 57 times. Investigators later reported that when Price confessed, he mimicked the dying sounds of his victims without any apparent distress. He was arrested a month before his 16th birthday. Under Rhode Island law at the time, he could not be tried or sentenced as an adult, meaning he would be held in a juvenile facility only until he turned 21. He bragged openly that he would make history when the state was forced to release him. He was right about the legal situation, but the state managed to keep him incarcerated through charges he accumulated behind bars: extortion, assault on correctional officers, and criminal contempt. The Rhode Island legislature changed the law for future cases, but the new statute could not be applied retroactively to Price. In 2004, he was transferred to a Florida prison due to his ongoing violent behavior. In 2019, a Florida judge sentenced him to 25 additional years for stabbing a fellow inmate with a 5-inch homemade knife at Suwannee Correctional Institution. The attack was captured on prison video and described by prosecutors as a premeditated attempt to inflict mortal wounds. He remains incarcerated in Florida,